ingratitude and independence.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you guys hope to nail home to the students in the second lesson?
Yeah.
Last week, I mentioned the story of Adam and Eve, and for me, when I'm thinking about this, the fallen side, the human nature side, I kind of use Adam and Eve as this foundational story. And I think it's helpful here too. We looked at harm and harmony last week. This week we're looking at ingratitude and independence. And I think those two things go together almost successively. And I think of Eve taking the fruit and Adam following her suit. You see the ingratitude there of look at everything that they have. We can certainly identify, look at all the things we have, and yet our ingratitude, that fundamental lack of recognition that God has given all this to us by gift. It's ingratitude that says, I want this, and we take that. And independence is really turning around and walking your way and looking at God over your shoulder and saying,
Thanks,
adios, I got this. I got this.
Right.
I don't need you. I have this. So you can see how ingratitude really quickly degenerates into ingratitude, degenerates into independence.
Okay.
And of course, it's that independence that has shattered everything since. Again, going back to the church is a way of trying to bring harmony out of that harm through Jesus. It's trying to reverse ingratitude into gratitude, and independence into mutual dependence on Jesus and the Spirit and each other as fellow Christians.
Yeah, and if you think of again, trying to understand kind of our human nature and how God is inviting us into His nature. We think of, if you think of God's nature as the good giving nature of God, sacrificial nature of God, and you think really of the satanic nature as just a taking nature. It's going to take from people no matter what it costs them. It just takes what it wants. And then, human nature is kind of somewhat in between those two. We don't want to be takers. We don't want to be demonic, but we're not really sure we want to be givers either. We just want, right. We just want to keep what we have. That's kind of our sense of justice is, I earned this. This is mine.
That's the American way.
Right, right. And so that's kind of what we're struggling with is how do you go from that human nature to godly nature?
Right.
We can't do that. We can become takers all by ourselves, but to ascend to God's nature, that's not in us. We don't have the power to do that. It's God being able to give His nature to us, to turn us from keepers into givers. And if we fail to do that, if we're not allowing Him to transform our nature into His giving nature, then essentially we're becoming takers. Because God is giving us things all the time, and if we have no gratitude for that, then we're becoming takers. We're taking without giving back.
Right.
And what we're supposed to be giving back is our thanks. God is the giver, and we are the thanks givers.
Right.
And if we're not doing that, then we're becoming takers rather than becoming givers.
And so, what's the most, or let me change this, how is the best way that we can show our gratefulness to God?
Yeah, and I think that's the gift of ourselves.
Or
Is
entire
giving
self,
ourselves to God.
my money or whatever, but me, I give myself.
Right. We often, and if you see in the pagan cultures, that's often the pagan cultures, they want to do sacrifices. They want to give something to appease this God so that this God will leave them alone.
Right.
And we can kind of act that way as well. What can I give to God instead of giving Him me?
Right.
And that's what He wants.
And that's almost, I think you're searching for the scripture I'm thinking about when it says, I want me to be this sacrifice,
Right.
the living sacrifice. Right, and that's the best
Paul
result.
says to the Romans, present your bodies a living sacrifice. It's interesting there, he uses the plural and the singular side by side. Bodies for a single sacrifice. Each one of us are part of the body of Christ. It's a single sacrifice that we're all making together, coming to give ourselves. It's not just about our money. It's not just about, it's the whole person. What's interesting is at the very beginning of Romans, in Romans 1, when Paul's talking about the plight of humanity, he really goes back and says the first sin, the first great sin is, and they were unthankful. They were unthankful, and you think, oh, Thanksgiving's nice, and it's close to Thanksgiving time right now. We got turkey coming up, and we sort of give lip service to Thanksgiving, but it is the original sin. You know, Paul looks at this, God had done all of this for them, and the invisible realm is really understood and known through the visible creation, and yet they turned their back on it, and they were ungrateful. And interesting, what follows that ingratitude is idolatry. They begin to worship this and that. And I think that's what happens when we're ungrateful and we go into independence. When we're independent, when we're alone, all we have is idolatry. All we have is the things that we can make and come up with. And of course, those things shatter us and wound us and others. So this lesson really, I think, asks of us to really dig into being honest about that fundamental ingratitude and independence in our spirits, and asks us to look to the answer of that, which is in Jesus Christ. I want to make just a quick note to our Sabbath school teachers. As you're going through the questions and answers, we probably spend almost as much time writing the teacher's guide as we do writing the lesson itself. So for the teachers, you know, we don't want you to sit there and read the answers out of the teacher's guide, but there's a lot of good information that will help kind of focus and steer. The questions are really open-ended. They're meant to encourage people to study, and we give some verses to help them along. But there's a lot of material in the teacher's guide. So as teachers prepare for class, go back and get familiar with sort of the vision that we have, and then they add their own insights and present it in a way that guides the class and makes the most out of the class.
Right. So I like that we went back to the first chapter of the book of Romans, because it shows the flow that it starts with ingratitude, but then it leads to unrighteousness. And that is the next lesson. Am I right this time?
Yes. Yes, I think so.